What's up, everybody? Welcome to Transformation Radio, where we transform lives through purposeful conversations, regardless of how uncomfortable and unpopular those conversations are.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening sky. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Have you ever found yourself at a space in life where everything that you have known, you're now questioning or has come into question? Like everything that was normal for you no longer seems to make sense, and you are still attempting to apply the same tools, strategies, and techniques to your present moment that have worked in your past. That's okay. It's all right. Listen, I have a podcast I want you to listen to. It's called the What Now Podcast, where we have conversations about effectively addressing life's most difficult or defining moments, all right? We have conversations over there that I believe would benefit you greatly. So I want you to head over to www.thewhatnowpodcast.me, www.thewhatnowpodcast.me. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Transformation Radio. That's right, Transformation Radio, where we transform lives through purposeful conversations, regardless of how uncomfortable and unpopular those conversations are. My name is Clifton Pettyjohn. I'm a purpose strategist, author, transformation coach, and spiritual leader. I provide tools and strategies to transition you from merely existing to living a life full of purpose. Now, you might be out there listening and you're wondering if I'm talking to you. Here's what I want you to do very quickly. We're going to do this quick exercise that I usually do in my workshops or in my coaching sessions or in the webinars now. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a deep breath in, hold it, breathe out. One more time, breathe in, hold it, breathe out. Now, if you were able to do that exercise, then yes, I was talking to you. As long as there's breath remaining in your body, purpose yet remain. All right? And I'm glad you tuned in on tonight, because I know we're going to talk a little bit about purpose on tonight as well. So therefore, you'll leave here with greater clarity and direction and insight as it relates to your purpose. Now, I got this question this week. I haven't gotten it in a long time. So I'm going to go ahead and answer it. Somebody wanted to know what the number 4 represents in the word transformation. I'm glad you asked. The number 4 represents the 4 pillars on which I do everything from ministry to business to my personal life. Number one, educate. I aim to educate in everything that I do. I want to make it fun. I want to make it exciting. I want to make it engaging, but I want you to be educated even greater than you were before you came into my presence. Empower. I want to empower you. Education is a part of empowerment, but when you are empowered, that means you are given the tools, techniques, and strategies that you need in order to be successful in all core areas of your life. And that's what we focus on here on this radio show. Activate. We want to stir up those gifts, callings, talents, and abilities that are inside of you. We want you to be active. There's no need of educating you and empowering you, and then there's no activation or no action to follow that education and empowerment. So after you've been educated, after you've been empowered, after you have been activated, then we want to release you. And we talk about releasing in different facets. I always talk about it, you being released in another dimension or another experience of your purpose. If you are gaining greater understanding, then that should unlock some things inside of you and release some things inside of you and release you to live freely in your purpose. So that's what the 4 stands for in transformation. Either you see it at the Transformation Center, Transforming Transformers, or Transformation Radio, okay? Listen, I want to thank you all for being supporters. You guys are amazing. Without you, there would be no show. I always say it. There'd be no purpose for me getting behind this microphone and talking. I'd just be talking to myself. But I see how you guys are watching. I get your feedback, and we love it. Continue to send your feedback to info@CliftonPettyjohn.com or 302-648-5544. You can text your feedback there, okay? Also, you heard on the intro, and I apologize for tonight's intro because I don't know what I did, but I did not line the correct intro up. So, but you did hear about my podcast. I want you guys to, when you get a chance, go over and listen to the podcast. It will bless your life. It talks about what now moments. We've all experienced those what now moments where we have classified it as where we feel as if life has hit us from the left, the right, the front, the back, the left side, the right side, the top, bottom. It just hit us all over the place, and we seem to be caught off guard. But we discuss effective ways of facing those moments instead of running from those moments or fearing those moments or magnifying those moments. We discuss ways there. So head over to www.thewhatnowpodcast.me. But don't head over yet because I want you to hear tonight's show. Okay, we have an amazing guest on tonight. We are about to get to him. Before we do, I have to do my disclaimer. Those who listen all the time, you already know how this goes. The phone lines are open throughout the entire show. Why? Because this is a conversation, and we want you to be engaged in the conversation. So we open the phone line. You can call in with your questions and your comments as it relates to the topics and the subjects that we are covering at the time. Now, here's the reality about this show. And you guys, if you listen, or if you're beginning to listen, you will notice that I have people from all walks of life. That means we have different belief systems, different backgrounds. It's just a diverse community. So that means you are not going to agree with everything that our guests say, and you're not going to agree with everything that I say, and vice versa. However, here, this is a secured environment, a safe space for people to express their beliefs, to express their feelings freely, and not be judged because of them. So, when you call in, let's keep that in mind. It's okay to disagree. We respect your disagreement. I believe that when we get together and we all don't believe the same, don't think the same, don't walk the same, don't talk the same, then we're introduced even more to the greatness of who God is, because we are diverse people. We are diverse groups. And I believe that diversity many times is to introduce us to something we've never been introduced to before. So when you call in, keep that in mind, because if we call in And we're disrespectful. You already know I have to hit the X, but I don't believe we're going to have that on tonight. I believe that everybody is coming with an open heart, an open mind, and an open spirit, ready to listen, learn, and apply what needs to be applied to their personal life. So before I get to the guests, let me hit this one more ad, and then we're going to go right to our guests. Are you thinking of selling or buying your dream home? Then contact Harrison Domerkin, the People's Agent. As a licensed realtor in both Delaware and Maryland, Harrison desires to help you sell or buy your home, and he promises you that your experience with him will be great. Call or text him today at 302-260-0659 or email him at harrisondomerkant@gmail.com. All right, we're back. Now let's get to our guest. He is the founder of Never Quit Climbing. Now that right there, we could have a whole show on Never Quit Climbing. He's also a pastor, an overcoming expert. Now listen, we all can use a little overcoming expertise in our life as well. And he's an author and speaker. Help me welcome to the show, Gary Sinclair. Gary, how are you tonight, sir? Hello? Gary, are you there? You may still be muted. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on. It says he's on the line. Gary, if you're still on the line, do me a favor, hang up real quick and then call back because we can't hear you. All right. So he's going to hang up and call right back. As I said, y'all, he's amazing. We're going to do one more commercial while we're waiting for him to call back. Anthony Baker Jr. is the CEO of a nonprofit community organization called Helping the Homeless. As an organization, they are committed to changing lives and making others smile. In addition to providing hands-on services for the homeless community all over Philadelphia, they also have a Big Brothers mentoring program where participating youth are taught the value of giving back to their community. To learn more about the organization, call 215-487-8589 or email them at hthphilly@gmail.com. All right, let's try this again, guys. Hello, Gary.
Hey, you got me now?
There we go. Now we can hear you.
All right. I don't know. I won't happen. I got cut off once, but that's okay. Glad we got connected.
Yeah, that's okay. Listen, that just means we're going to have an awesome and amazing show. So I'm excited about that.
That'll work.
All right. So, as I told you off the air, I always like to start each conversation with a little icebreaker. I'm going to use the same icebreaker question I always use. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that'll work. Let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to use the same icebreaker question I always use, and that question is, if you had one superpower or could have one superpower, what would that superpower be and why?
Oh, wow. It would be a little bit, selfish at this point. I would love to fly. I am a wannabe pilot. I'm still thinking at my age of taking flying lessons. I just love, I get up there and I see everything God made, and that would be a thrill. I would love to do that.
Awesome, awesome. I like that. Yeah, that flying would be a great ability to have.
Yep. And then you can help people. You do all sorts of fun things.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we're going to get into the game. The game always leads into our conversation. I have 5 words. I'm going to give
All
you
right.
one word at a time, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind when you hear that word. Now, sometimes I will ask you to elaborate on it, and that
Sure.
kind of, we go in and out of the game sometimes during the conversation, but we just go with the flow.
Great.
All right? So the first word is life. Life.
Life. Wow. I think, life is realizing, number one, you're here, and number two, that you have a purpose. Life is existence is, to me, sounds like a terrible thing, but a life with a purpose and meaning it can be awesome even in the middle of your problem.
Awesome. Now, I'm not going to go into details with that because we're going to come back to that, but that's good right there.
Cool.
Number 2, inspiration. Inspiration.
Well, I think inspiration is anytime you see greatness. Of course, God's greatness tops it all. But I love watching Olympic athletes. I love I'm a musician, so I love hearing great musicians. And so anybody who's worked really hard at what they do and does something great, man, that fires me up.
And I like what you said because you were basically showing us where you find inspiration from. And I just had a conversation earlier with somebody about allowing themselves to explore and find inspiration in, the small things in life. Sometimes we think that inspiration has to come from another person or from what we programmed ourselves to believe to be our inspiration. But I believe that there are things that can inspire us the more we begin to learn more about ourselves, our creator, and even about life in general.
That's a great word, because I think sometimes we don't look for inspiration. We're not looking in the, like you said, even the small things. And there's some great things up.
And I think we really have the time that we're in right now in life. I really believe we have to look at the simple things for inspiration, because if not, it's so easy to see the negative things with the pandemic that's going on and everything else that we have going on. It's so easy. The negative things are so magnified that if we don't begin to look for inspiration in, some of the small things, it makes our day a little harder, or a lot of harder.
You bet.
Okay. So the next word, you kind of talked about this one in the first word. That's why I said we were going to come back to it. But purpose.
Yeah. Well, one, everybody has one or more. Even after bad times, I work with people a lot, and sometimes they say, I feel like I lost my purpose because I lost my job. And I go, no, you didn't. You may have a different one right now, but you have a purpose every day. And, man, when you get a hold of that, that can get you over a lot of tough times when you realize, I didn't lose everything, even though I lost my job or I'm going through a struggle right now.
So let's talk about that just a little bit, about purpose and everything, because I always like to hear from different experts their whole philosophy on or how, I guess I'll frame it this way. How did you discover your purpose?
I think slowly, and I'm not sure I've only had one. I think purpose can change over time. So at this stage of life where we're kind of getting in those retirement years, our purpose is a little different right now. We're doing a lot of helping of people in ministry, where before we were people in ministry, and now we're sort of doing both. But purpose is always there, and you have one every day. For a while I drove for Lyft, for a couple of years, like Uber. And
Mm-hmm.
every time I got in my car, God reminded me I had a purpose, and it was to help a person or a couple of people. I mean, we got together it was a God thing, And so even on a day when I feel like, what am I doing? I go, today I know God will show me that I have a purpose to help somebody. So and it's just, I got to tell you story after story. It's so fun. And you talk about inspiration. That's part of
I love the example you use only because I DoorDash every now and then.
Oh, well, there you go.
And I remember when I first started, in my just in my prayer time, God telling me, that it was purpose behind that as well, and how that, was tied into what He had called and created me to do. And after I understood that, my prayer is always, God, direct me to those that you desire for me to minister to today. And then when I say minister to, it doesn't mean that I'm just sitting and, just my conversation with them. Or I've had people tell me before we had to wear masks, your smile, I needed your smile today. You don't understand what your smile did for me today. And that's why I always try to make sure that even within myself and instilling this in the young people that I mentor and everyone that I encounter, it's the small things that mean so much to a lot of people sometimes. So sometimes we got to slow down a little bit.
Yep.
And be in that moment.
And we've got to be willing to say, hey, I got to take time right now with this person. And it's really fun.
Absolutely. Now, you talked about a transitional moment that in your life. You were talking about ministry, in that sense where it was a time where it was that you were more or less in the forefront the majority of the time, and now you see yourself helping. How did you handle that transition?
Well, I'd love to say I handled it wonderfully, and I had to grieve some of that, Yeah, I had there were some down times. I still have my moments, and that's when I need those inspirations, and God just reminds me, of why I'm here and what I'm doing, and take your time, and you're going to be okay. And a quick story. I was part of a funeral for a 38-year-old guy that went to my church. 25 years ago, I also was part of another funeral, his 18-year-old sister. And so here's this family who's lost their second child, just way too early. But anyway, so I went to this funeral that was just a couple weeks ago, and they asked me to come and just do a little part in it. And the dad caught me and he said, do you want to hear a God story? And I said, well, I need one. And he said, well, here's the deal. He said, do you remember you were on television? I did a 3-minute spot, kind of the beginning of the COVID stuff, on our Indianapolis CBS station. Well, this kid who lost his life was actually incarcerated, and he was sitting in a jail close enough to hear this TV station the morning I was on. And it was just this unbelievable that there's no way I could have. There's no way that should have happened. And that kid needed to hear my voice that day, and he did. And it was just unreal. But God reminded me, you're okay.
And that's so powerful, because that's why I tell people, or I explain to people all the time, that sometimes we don't realize how things link together. Like we see it on movies. Like you see it on movies, how things link together, and then as the plot begins to build, it comes together. But sometimes in life, until we have those conversations with individuals, we don't know the work that God is doing behind the scenes.
No.
So sometimes that's why I tell people, don't get too discouraged, because just because you don't see things happening, above ground or out in the forefront, He's working on some things behind the scene and underground.
Well, here's another illustration I use that I really like, and I do a message on that ends with the entire audience taking out a domino that I gave them at the beginning of the service. They had no idea what that domino was for, and I talk about this whole idea of purpose and God, how these God moments and Him using you, and I say, all right, take out your domino, and I say, listen, off. What God wants to do in your life is you're the first domino of thousands that He has set up, kind of like they do on YouTube, where you see these incredible displays. But He said all God's asking you to do is knock over the first one, and that's that person you meet, and you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what other dominoes are going to get knocked over, but God does, because He's already set up. And so just be thrilled and that you got a chance to knock over the first one and then look for the next one, another one the next one. And I love that picture because then it says I won't see it all. I may not know it all till heaven, but I can see the beginning.
Oh, that's powerful when you look at it, in that sense, because I think that sometimes we want to see it all, but it just may not be meant for us to see it all. Like you said, our responsibility is just making sure that we do our job to knock down that first domino right after us, so that it continue to build. It can continue to build that domino effect as it relates to purpose and life and impact and all of those things. That's good. All right. So the next word is faith. Faith.
Right. Well, the great chapter in the Bible, Hebrews 11, it talks about faith. Faith, of course, is believing in something, having reason to believe in something that's bigger than you are. And, of course, our faith is in God. But, in Hebrews 11, you got all those people at the beginning who it says, by faith Moses, by faith Abraham, by faith all these people did stuff. And so we think, well, gee, then, I guess if I have enough faith, I'm going to have the same results they did. Well, yes, you can. But at the end of that chapter, it also says, but these didn't get to see the outcome. They still had faith. But, man, they went through, awful things. I mean, that list is unbelievable. And yet, God honored them. God blessed them. God did incredible things, but some of those things it says they never got to see, at least in this life. So faith is powerful. Faith isn't jumping off a cliff. Faith is saying, I believe. Well, let me just put it this way. I'm a mountain guy, and of course my website and all that is Never Quit Climbing. But I love the mountain illustrations because there's so many good parts, good lessons, and one of them is the rope. When you climb mountains, you often use rope and you do technical climbing. Well, your faith is that the rope will hold you. That's one of the big components of climbing. And so you go over the side, maybe you're rappelling back down, and you have to say, I'm doing this. I could die if the rope breaks, but I trust the rope. I know what rope I have, etc. So I think a lot of Christians don't ever put themselves in the position where they have to trust the power of the rope. And, man, that's when your faith grows, is when you say, hey, God, you don't come through, I'm going to die, so to speak. But that's where you got to live. And that's when some of the most awesome adventures and thrills and blessings and all that take place, I think.
That's so true. You hit something right there that sometimes we don't put ourselves in positions to where we have to trust the rope or symbolically trust the rope, but trust God.
Yep.
We always, I know with myself, one of the things I always talk to a lot of people about with myself is that I always have a safety net with some things.
Yeah.
And one of the things purpose has taught me is that as long as you operate with that safety net, you're going to stay right there stagnant. You're not going to experience anything new. You're not going, and even as you're talking about climbing, my viewpoint, my vantage point would never change, and I'll still be level with some things that I may have been called to conquer if I'm never willing to take that chance to trust the rope and begin to climb those mountains.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And faith, so faith has to go beyond us. It goes beyond our resources. It goes beyond our, all of that. But man, I'll tell you, I've had some of the greatest thrills, going over the side of a mountain and getting to the bottom and going, I want to do that again. I call it exhilarating terror. It's the way we ought to live. We're scared, but we're exhilarated when it's all done because God's rope helps.
Awesome. Now let's talk about that naturally as well. With how many years have you been climbing mountains?
Well, I started when I was 11. I did my first. My parents took us out west a lot, and I was so thankful for that. And we tried to do a mountain called Long Peak. My dad and I got sick, so we went back down. My mom went back up with friends and finished it. And I said, I'm going to do that mountain someday. And 30 years to the day almost, I did it with my son. And that was really
awesome.
Amazing. So I kind of got started there. And then I started doing some sport climbing before I got a little too old to be doing that. But my wife and I still love to hike, and the mountains are one of our favorite places.
Awesome. Now, when you started, you talked about you got sick. Are there different breathing techniques that you have to have, the higher altitudes that you reach, or is there something that you prepare for?
Yeah, there are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great illustration. We were doing mountains that are 14,000 feet high. I've done, I think, 9 in Colorado. And did several with my son and a couple with my daughter, and finally one with my wife. And when you get up above 12,000 feet, I mean, particularly when you live where we live, we're kind of down near sea level. Man, it gets harder, and that's a great lesson to. I tell people, look, you've been going through this struggle for a long time, and I know what you're saying. You're saying, why is it harder now? And I say, well, think about a mountain. It's harder nearer the top because you're exhausted. You've maybe hiked in elevation for hours and hours and hours, and the air's thinner. So sometimes that's the way it is. It's harder as you get nearer the top, but it's worth it. And my little second part of my never quit climbing mantra is, it never quit climbing. The view from the top is worth it. But you got to go through some of that hard stuff to get there. So yeah, we have breathing techniques. We take our time. We acclimatize. That's another thing you have to do in the mountains. You don't just fly out to Colorado and walk up the trail and go to 14,000 feet. You get sick. Mount Everest, that's why they do base camps and Camp 1 and Camp 2 and all that, because of that. So, really important to be prepared.
And I like how you as you were just talking about all of that, my head was spinning, like not spinning in a bad way, but spinning with even the thoughts of, relating that to our spiritual walk, even some of the emotional things that we go through. Like, we're so busy sometimes trying to get to the top that we're not even enjoying the process and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves through the process, so that when we get to the top, we're able to handle, the thinner air and to handle everything that comes along with it, so we can enjoy the view, from the top. So I like that. I like how you take that.
That's a great reminder, because one of the things, my wife had cancer 15 years ago, and that was where we began to really learn these principles. And when we found out that she had cancer, it was like Mount Everest. And we learned fairly quickly that you don't climb a mountain by looking at the summit. You climb a mountain by taking the next part of the trail. And that was huge for us, because we started hearing about surgeries and all this stuff. And finally, God, I know God has said practically audibly to us, listen, slow down. All you have to do is get through the next part of this trail. I've got the whole deal, but you just get up the next part of the trail. And so it took our mountain and brought it down the side. And if there's a principle that I would tell people to live with as you face your own personal mountain, that's number one. Just get up the next part of the trail, and because that's how you climb a mountain. In fact, you hit on it. What does Scripture say? It says, "Walk in the Spirit, walk in the light, walk in the truth." Walk by faith. It's largely a walk. I mean, I know there are references to running with here and there, but those are a little different contexts. I think the big picture is walk, and God honors that, and He gives us enough light, to get up the next part of the trail. But man, that is a biggie. That's huge.
That right there, in and of itself, that number one principle you gave can hold us for a little while, because that is a lot of our distraction. A lot of our distraction. Sure. I tell people a lot of times, especially as visionaries, one of the things that I had to understand about being a visionary is that sometimes I'm so focused on the big picture that I'm missing the little details that are needed to develop the big picture. So that right there can carry us through for a while right there.
Yep. Yeah.
That was good.
That's number one.
Awesome. Now we have one more word before we continue with the conversation, and that word is transformation.
Oh, wow. Well, I love that in your program, and that you put that high on the list. To me, we even in the Christian world, we have a lot of information and not nearly enough transformation. To me, transformation is the so what of our information. It's the, well, wait, how does this change us? As a speaker, a pastor, and leadership trainer and all that, one of the things I tell people that I'm teaching about speaking is you've got to have a part of your message that says, how does this matter? How does this change you? What can you do to literally be different as a result of this? And of course, Romans 12:2 says that transformation is more than information. It's our mind, it's our soul, it's us being changed on the inside as well as the outside. So to me, that's what the whole Christian life is about. It's about 1 John chapter 3:2 that says someday we'll be like Christ. So the whole deal is become like Christ during this life, and we don't do it perfectly. We're still human, but that's what God wants to do in us. And sometimes that transformation takes place through hard things, difficult times. You get stronger. You're a better pastor, or a better teacher, or a better husband, or a better wife because you went through some kind of tough times. So as well as I do, Scripture says that's the case.
Absolutely. And now let's talk your story. Let's begin to dive into your story. On the show, I kind of like to show people, because sometimes I don't read bios, as you see. I post the bios on the website, but I don't read them, only because sometimes bios can be a little intimidating. And a lot of the people that listen to the show are people that feel like, I'll never be able to attain that. So here I kind of like for our guests to give like the back end of their story and how they became, who it is that they became, so that it can connect with our listening audience and they can realize, wait a minute, they experienced some of the same things I experienced, so there is hope for me. So let's talk about the early parts of your story. Where did you start, and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, well, I had great, not perfect, but I had Christian parents who were, you know, gave us as many opportunities as they could. We didn't have a lot. We went on those vacations to the mountains. I think the first one I did in the mountains was when I was in the second or third grade, and but I loved it, and so I was really thankful for that. My dad was a pretty good musician, and so I got into music as well, and went on to college and grad school, and I met a really awesome lady who I've been married to for 44 years, and
awesome.
we together both loved the Lord and said we want to serve, and so we taught for a while, and then for a good number of years in our different ministry roles, and many of them together, we serve people. Again, we want to help people. She works with moms in the MOPS program and some other kinds of things. She loves helping women, and now she's helping pastors and missionary wives, and along with me. I've been to Russia 19 times for ministry, and she's gone with me 4 of those. And so I think one of the cool things for us is that we've grown and become by doing ministry together. And of course, we've been parents together. We have two grown kids and 6 grand boys that are really fun. and however, in the middle of all that, we went through her cancer journey. We had just climbed a mountain. Ironically, it was her first one that she'd ever gone to the summit on. We did not know she had cancer, and 3 months later was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer, and went through surgeries and chemos and radiations and all of that. But we grew like crazy during that. It was hard. It's probably the hardest thing we've had to go through together. But man, it was out of that God won. I just wrote this book last year, but the story, we have been telling the story for 15 years and helping other people. She's worked with people who have cancer. We've been, able to help people along the way of that, but also helping other people just overcome other stuff, marriage issues and finance stuff, but using these principles, not as easy answers, but just as, hey, a guideline to give them a little bit of hope that you can make it. We used this. I did this once on a mountain. My wife and I were hiking, and we didn't think we were getting anywhere. And I finally said, look, let me go up ahead and see if we can make it. And sure enough, I went ahead, and it was still very steep, but I came back and I said, look, we're not far. She's told that story. She said, you know what? That's what we do. We tell people we have been up this mountain, and we tell them you can make it. Sometimes we walk with them. Sometimes we point out hazards, but we go before them. And that's really something that we continue to do. But we got there through people who helped us and things we learned along the way.
First, I love the team concept. I don't see enough of that anymore. I love the husband and wife team. The ministry I grew up in, my pastors were a husband and wife team. I love that. I love the whole concept. That's number one. Number two, your illustration about going before instead of trying to say, come on, let's go. We can do it. We can do it. I love that too, because you set an example of going before to know that you could make it. And I feel like sometimes I don't see enough of that anymore. And it may just be where I'm at or the experiences I've had, but I love that part of it. But I also want to talk about, you talked about how you went to Russia 19 times.
Yeah.
How was that culture-wise with ministry and, just in everyday life? how was the culture there versus here, and then how did that experience help you in ministry and in your personal life?
Sure. Well, let me first say that I never dreamt that I would spend the kind of time I've spent over there. When I grew up, we were hiding under our desk in school preparing for bombing, because that's what we all thought was going to happen. So that was the enemy, and God, again, it was just a God thing where through a variety of connections I was able to go. Our church started a sister church relationship there, and then I began to teach, and now we're doing some things with pastors, and in fact part of our pastor ministry is in Russia. I do Skype or a Zoom meeting every Saturday with a Russian pastor, and we've got several others we work with. What it's done for me is to let me know that the whole world doesn't worship like America. The whole world doesn't do church like we do church. And that's true here too. We have different cultures and different styles, and that's okay. But I tell you, every time I go and I get to watch these people who for many, many years had no access. Now we have the internet, and they get to listen to worship and gospel music and all that kind of thing that they never got before. Wow, and to hear them now sing and worship, because they are so thankful for what they have. I mean, that just it just kills me in a good way. I'll have tears coming down my cheeks the moment I hear them start, just because I can see in their face how thankful they are. I can see when you give them a Bible. They have more access to that now, but they're still at that place where it's precious to them. They don't want to lose it. They don't, it's in their language. They hear a song now in their language. And I've gotten to take other leaders with me, and sometimes a lot of what we do is we just sit there and listen to them, and they share their heart, and they have their struggles, and we just try to give them hope, not easy answers, but give them hope that they can make it. And so, I'll be going back as soon as we can. The culture and the circumstances are such that we can go. I'm hoping maybe in the fall. I don't know. We'll see. I was there last.
Got you. Yeah, I'm sure that's an amazing experience. I always encourage on the show. I talk about experiencing other cultures, so that I think sometimes it causes us to value what we sometimes have become so accustomed to that we might take for granted. So I always push that. That's why I wanted to ask that question.
Well, and here's the other thing. With the internet, with Zoom and Skype and all, we've got open doors into these countries. You don't have to go 19 times. It's
right.
I love the opportunities I have, but I do most of my work now on a Zoom call. I had a Zoom call with Russian pastors. It was 7:00 in the morning for me here today. It was 2:00 in the afternoon for the ones in Moscow, and it was 9:00 at night for those in Eastern Russia. And we were having a conversation. How cool is that? I mean, that's just miraculous today.
It is awesome how much technology has advanced, and I believe that we have to learn how to use the advancement of technology in a more positive manner. And you're using an example of how it can be used in the positive for ministry, for business, for all of those things. So that's awesome.
Yep. Yeah.
So now let's talk about the book. Well, I see you've written more than one book, but I want to talk about the Never Quit Climbing book.
Yep, you bet.
Because that seems to be the whole concept of your ministry and everything that you present. I like that from a marketing standpoint. I really like that, the whole mountain concept with everything. So how did you
Cliff,
decide?
Cool.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say what's cool about that is that I get to speak in businesses. They'll say, "Hey, our people struggle with overcoming. They've got so can you come in and talk about that?" So that's what it's very flexible. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of people who are interested. So I appreciate you mentioning.
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. It speaks. It has no language barrier. Right. That concept of overcoming has no language barrier because we all have personal things that we're going through, or businesses corporately that they're going through, ministry, the challenges that, ministry can go through, especially now with the pandemic and a lot of people having to learn how to broadcast over the internet and adjust the ministry that way. It really speaks to the masses. That's why I was like, it's like so awesome in that concept. So how did it become a book? Did you always know you were going to be an author, or was it something that you got inspired to do and just started doing it?
Yeah, I started writing a little bit at a time. If you would have talked to my 10th and 11th grade English teacher, she would have been horrified to think of me as an author, but she actually helped make me one, so I'm thankful for that.
Oh,
I
awesome.
started, I think the issue is communication. I'm a musician and I was a pastor and I love to speak. I think writing was just the natural for me, putting this down on paper. I started saying the same things over and over, in counseling and whatever. So my first couple of books were kind of short and sweet. One called Turn Up or Turn Around Your Marriage, another called Turn Up or Turn Around Your Parenting. They were just real practical, kind of 100-page long things. But yeah, Never Quit Climbing has been in my mind for years, particularly since Jackie's cancer, though I've used that phrase for a lot of years. But I turned it into a website and people seem to resonate with it. But I wanted to put these principles down on paper, that we used and that got us through her cancer. Let me give you one more quick one because this is really high on the list, and that's never climb alone. You are foolish on a real mountain to be up there by yourself because you get hurt, you fall, whatever. If you remember Aaron Ralston, the guy who had to cut off his arm years ago in 2005 in Utah because it got caught behind a boulder. Well, he's by himself. And it is an amazing story. He lived, and he's, telling his story. But I used him as an example and say, if he hadn't been alone, there's a good chance he'd still have his arm. And the same way is true in whatever mountain we're facing. It's good to have somebody with you who's going to either walk with you. Sometimes you need somebody to kick you in the tail and say, look, keep going. In the book, I talk about how to pick your people who climb, your fellow climbers, as I call them. You don't always want your best friend because sometimes your best friend's just too nice. And you need somebody who's nice, but hey, we'll say, come on, let's do this. So that's another huge one. My wife had a gal who would take her to many of her chemo appointments, drove her in the winter in their car with the heated seats and all that cool stuff. And she had cancer herself. That was 15 years ago. They said her cancer was terminal. She's still alive. But, it's a wonderful story, but she was one of those people that my wife needed to climb with her because she understood the climb. She got it. She'd been there. So, that's the kind of things that I wanted to put on paper. And so those are the, we talk about what to put in your backpack. And on a mountain, it's practical things. But there's some emotional and some practical things when we're climbing a personal mountain we need to put in our backpack. So those are the kind of things that are in the book. And I tell a lot of stories. I give a little of our background, and I keep it really interesting that way, I hope.
Awesome, awesome. Now, was one more thing that you had said. I'm looking over my notes. As you're talking, I'm taking my notes here.
Sure.
Now, music-wise, you said you were a musician. What instruments do you play?
Yeah, I play keys and bass.
Okay.
My keys are better than my bass.
Okay.
But yeah, I used to be a worship leader for when I was starting out in church. I still play in the band when they need me. I'll jump in and right now it's cheaper than therapy, the way I look at it. So, but I love playing, and so it's just been a really great part of my life. And I wrote songs for my kids when they were when they were 12. They got a song every birthday, and that was sort of fun.
Okay. Awesome, awesome. Now, you also said you and your wife did do marriage counseling as well. Am I correct?
We do some of that. Mostly right now we're doing that. Actually, this weekend we're going to Kentucky to do a marriage retreat. But most of that we do kind of informally now. I used to do it as part of my job, and she would often work with wives. But we do work with pastors who are struggling, because often when the pastor's struggling, the man, there's a spouse struggling. And so right now that's a lot of what she does, as well as helping just young moms, both with marriage and being a parent.
Now, I want to ask you a question about marriage, because I think you said y'all have been married 47 years?
44.
44, okay. 44 years. What the mentality of marriage kind of seems to have changed over the years. What are some changes that you have seen as it relates to, or maybe this is just me that have seen some changes, but what are some changes that you have seen concerning people's mindset concerning marriage?
Well, I've seen a movement towards more attention on the kids than the marriage. And let me tell you, I love my kids. I couldn't be more proud of them. Our son, just to brag a little bit, our son right now is in the bubble in Orlando, and he's one of the public address announcers that was picked to do all the NBA games. And couldn't be much more proud of that. Our daughter's wonderful mom and photographer, and they're just doing great things. So I'm very proud. However, our kids growing up saw my wife and I every week set aside a day or a partial day for us. And if I were to pick the one thing that has helped us get through 44 years, it's that we make time for each other. Sometimes we did it on very little money, and we would trade babysitters with somebody, and so we could get the kids watched for free. Sometimes it was just a quick breakfast on a Saturday morning, but most of the time over the years we've had a whole day that's ours. Some weeks it's just going and running errands, but we do them together. Other days we almost always have a meal together. It's not the only time we're together, but we just know we've made that commitment to each other, and there's something good about that. There's something that builds trust that says, hey, you matter to me. I'm willing to give you that kind of time. That's what we do. And I've seen that where people, it's like they don't have time. It's like, I love you. Of course we're married, but we don't even take vacations yet sometimes, or we don't get away. And I just think that's tragic. I just wrote another book, not to advertise that, but it's called Now, and I love your word now that's in some of your stuff, because it's based on that Luke 9 where everybody says, hey, but first I got to go do this, and before I got to go do that before I can follow Jesus. Well, I think I call it the someday syndrome, that we kind of live in that I'll do that someday. Someday I'll spend more time with my wife. Someday we'll take vacations. Man, I just think that's a mistake. Can't do everything, but don't put everything off, particularly with your spouse, to the future. and say, well, I got to get the kids through school. We got to get the kids through all their clubs and all their activities. Yeah, let your kids. Obviously, we sacrifice for our kids, but we can't sacrifice our marriage. And that's, to answer your question, that's the thing I think I've seen the most of. People just kind of put their marriage on the back burner.
I've noticed that. I always call it the relationship has been taken out of the concept of marriage. Like the dating, we don't date anymore. We're barely in the house. And if you look at it now with the pandemic, we've seen a rise in divorce, and those who may have been engaged or those who are dating each other are finding out, I don't want to be with you. I don't like you.
Right.
I'm laughing about it, but I know the seriousness of it. But I always say it's because sometimes we've gotten so caught up in, I'm divorced, so I know that I think my mindset was more along the idea or the concept of marriage versus the actual relationship and growing and the developing together and being that unit together. So that's why I wanted to ask, what was it that you and your wife had seen, during your times of being married and encountering other couples. So
yeah, well, that's one of them.
Yeah, I didn't want to go too deep into it because we could start a whole nother show on that. And we've actually talked ourselves off the air. I didn't even know if you realized that we had talked ourselves off the air.
I just saw that.
The conversation goes so fast, though. That's why I tell people. Some people say, I can't fill a whole hour. Well, it's easy once you get going. But I want to hit you with these 3 questions before I let you go. Again, I thank you for coming on tonight and sharing so freely with our listening audience. But the first question I always like to ask everybody is, because you've given us a lot over this time frame, so I'd like to ask, if everyone forgot everything that you said tonight, what would be one thing that you would want them to walk away with?
Well, I would go back to my first point about the mountain, that whatever you're facing, we all face tough stuff. Like I said, our little joke about marriage is we've been married 44 years and it's been 38 of the happiest years of our life. Well, whatever people are facing, financial mountain, a relationship mountain, an illness mountain, a job mountain, just get through the next thing. Find out what the next part of the trail is and go after it. And let God walk you through that. Get up that, and you will feel like, you know what? We've made progress. There is hope for me. Because one of the things I tell people on a mountain is when they say, I don't think I can make it to the top, I say, turn around. And the first thing that we do is we turn around and we look and we realize, look at all what we've come up.
Mm-hmm.
You can make this, but it's going to be hard. But let's just get up the next part of the trail. Sometimes it's 10 more steps. Then that's what you do. So you can't remember anything else. Use that one.
Awesome. Now, number 2. On the show, we like to honor or recognize what we call transforming transformers. And transforming transformers are individuals who have committed their life to their own personal transformation, yet they've also devoted time to assisting in the transformation of others. So they're like mentors, pastors, friends, family members, those that have been there in the background pushing us and encouraging us and telling us you can do this. And like you said earlier, sometimes having to nudge us and say, come on, you got to get it together. Do you have 2 or 3 people that you would like to acknowledge that have been there over your lifetime and different transitions of your life, through different transitions of your life that have been transforming transformers to you.
Yeah, you bet. By name? Can I mention them by name?
Sure.
Or just you want to hear about them?
You can give their name if you want to say a small thing about them. That's fine as well.
Well, yeah. I'll give first name. One is Jim. Jim, I actually played piano for Jim. Phenomenal singer. But he and I went to college together, and we actually started in ministry together, and roomed together, and went through the challenges of a new ministry out in Long Island, New York. And we have stayed friends for a lot of years, and Jim has just always been there. I don't see him a lot anymore, but we still connect, and when we get back together, it's just like old home week, and that's really good. He's one. Another would be a guy named Ed Frazier. Ed was my boss for years in Austin, Texas, and I couldn't. That was a guy I could walk into his office anytime, and he would not only listen to me, but then he would also challenge me, and he would ask me the best questions I've ever been asked. I mean, they were so good, they were so real, they were so practical. And so those two guys, and I still stay in touch a little bit with him, and they're awesome. I just need people like that. And now I have some new ones, but I'm just getting to know them.
Awesome. He has given us so much information on tonight. I pray that we will take that information and apply it to our own personal life. I love how he relates climbing natural mountains with actually, our spiritual journey. He even talked about our finances. He talked about a lot of different things. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the conversation. I'm not sure if he'll be able to call back in because we are off the air, but I want you guys to connect with him on all of his social media platforms. You can look for him just by typing in Gary Sinclair. That's GarySinclair. Look for him on all social media platforms. And then I want you guys to head over to Amazon and purchase his book, Never Quit Climbing, Overcoming Life's Seemingly Insurmountable. Hold on, I got to click it to get the rest of it. Insurmountable Mountains. I want you guys to head over and purchase your own personal copy of the book. Listen, I'm going to go ahead and close out the show. Another amazing interview. I want you guys to, as I say, connect with him. I'm going to go purchase the book myself. But we're back here on Friday night. It's our last show of July. Then in August, guys, we're closing out season 2 of Transformation Radio. Who would have thought, yo? I just keep getting excited about that because who would have even thought that we would have even had a episode 1 of Transformation Radio, let alone now finishing out season 2. And listen, we're going out with a bang, yo. August is about to be crazy, so you better get ready for it. I'm telling you now. And I think that's everything. As I said, head over, check out the What Now podcast, guys, www.thewhatnowpodcast.me. I want you guys to check out the latest episode. I had an interview with a gentleman that wrote a book about overcoming, his father committed suicide, but he's taken everything that he's experienced from that, and God is using him amazingly. Also, don't forget, check out my book, From Stagnation to Transformation. Visit www.cliftonpettyjohn.com. You're going to find the information about the book. You're going to get a free sample of the book, a complimentary sample of the book. I want you to read the sample, and then I want you to invest in your now to produce the future that you desire, or the future that's connected to your purpose, all right? So head over and do that. As I always say, create a great day, walk with purpose, and by all means, execute your vision.